Hey everyone, welcome back to the garage. Well, yeah, everything changed, so let's take a look. So, since you all probably last saw, some things have changed right in this area. Mainly, core support, we yanked it back out because we're changing up the radiator situation and kind of almost everything to do with the front end. I've also made a little bit of progress in some other areas that I'll show you a little bit later. But to start off with up here, the main change we're going to be doing is this is a standard Ford IDI radiator from like the early 80s up into 94. They ran this style of radiator with the top water neck on the passenger side and the bottom one on the driver's side, and a standard radiator cap. This setup I was originally hoping to use because it's a nice factory style setup and I thought it would work really good. But as some of you all remember, I was running into quite a bit of clearance interference with this mount here and the engine mount, and it was just going to be really tight in here. And we tried probably half a dozen things to try and make this mount fit a coolant pipe, because basically what we were trying to do is get a hose about this diameter to fit basically like that in a radiator and down around up into the water neck that would be out here. And no matter what we did, we just could not make it work. It just all ended up in things that were either not what I was happy with, or things that would probably end up causing a rub through a hose, or just nothing that seemed like it was going to work. And so then we were talking about it one day, and I remembered we were talking about, man, it'd be nice if I could just switch the radiator out. And I got to thinking, because I'd like to keep this size of radiator, and I don't really want to go to a custom one. We got to thinking that a Power Stroke radiator from this era is actually the same dimensions. It's a little thinner, but the main thing is this top outlet switches over to here, and this bottom outlet switches over to right here. And that is going to be huge for us with making this setup work, because what that's going to do is, instead of having to try to come up with a hose to loop up under and come up, I can just come straight out and into the water neck right in here, totally eliminating the issue of running underneath here. And then up top here, it makes it a little more of a challenge, but basically I just have to run a hose kind of out over into this region. So we're going to get that going, and as a part of that, I have to change out my overflow tank, because the factory IDI radiator used just a standard burp tank that is non-pressurized. It just has a cap to contain it, but there's no pressure in here. And the Power Stroke radiators got rid of the cap and went to the style of return tank that's pressurized. And so obviously I have to get the accompanying return tank. And I started thinking about it, and originally I was just going to mount it over here where the factory mounted the original burp tank for the IDI. But then I thought I'm going to have to run the line kind of over to here, because the outlet for the radiator, the fill line, is almost on the far edge of the radiator on this side, because it's made to go kind of over in this region where I have my air box in the factory application. And I'd rather not move this air box because it's in a really good location for hose routing. The other issue that I was thinking about was I've got my power steering pump down right up under here. It's this pump right here. And I had to figure out the hose routing for that. And the ideal location would be somewhere kind of in this region, right next to the pump, nice and high up to where I get plenty of flow into the pump. And it also allows easy return of the lines. And obviously this is a battery box, and I had a battery in here and didn't really know how I was going to make that work. But started thinking about it and talking with some buddies, and we decided that we're basically, I think, going to change this around. And I have actually over here a spare battery tray off of another truck. And what we're going to do is do what a lot of guys do with these trucks, is put a second battery over to right next to the fuse box here, and basically kind of stack them like this. I've got to move the fuse box a little bit, but basically it'll sit kind of in there like that. The batteries will stack right here. My battery cables will still work just fine, and I can run jumpers between them really nice and easy. And it'll actually keep it a little more compact, make it nice and short. So we're going to run with that, and hopefully that'll keep things a little tighter and give me also the room over here, so then I can put a burp tank over here for the Power Stroke radiator, as well as I then gain a location to mount my power steering reservoir, which is quite big. And admittedly, it's a little bigger than I initially thought. This is out of a Ford FL9000 semi-truck. And it's a little bigger than I initially had planned, but it'll actually, I think, work pretty good for us because this truck now has obviously the much bigger hydraulic power steering pump that it would have originally had. But it's also going to have, it's got Hydro Boost now, it's got obviously the factory power steering, and at some point I'm going to be adding on the Hydro Ram conversion, running a hydraulic cylinder down on the steering arms to help dampen the steering action. And that's obviously going to require quite a bit of extra hydraulic capacity, and the pump is more than capable, but I need to have a return reservoir that is also capable and matched to it. So I think this will be a good choice in the long end. Plus it says Ford on it, and that's obviously the right answer. That's actually the sole reason I bought this, was it said Ford on it, and I couldn't help myself, quite frankly. So anywho, some other updates from when we last saw you. I have improved the the fuel filter setup. I was actually, believe it or not, able to use the factory DT360 fuel filter mounting location and just modify the lines a little bit. I came across a filter that actually solved the problem that I initially had with using this, which was that it was going to hit the differential because of how long the filter was. I got lucky with another filter housing I had that it actually happened to have the same filter mounting base as the DT one, and it had a much shorter filter, and I cross-referenced them versus their capacity and their filtration size because I obviously didn't want to put a filter that wasn't compatible, and they turned out to be almost exactly the same. And so I went ahead and put that on there and bent up a metal fuel line to hook into it, and it actually transitions into a rubber section to then go into the frame side because obviously this is mounted to the motor and it needs to be able to flex. Also, we got the battery cable a little more routed. I got an end on it. Did a little more tidying up to the wiring since you all last saw it, but the main thing has just been getting this all set up because we've been spending a lot of time trying to get this coolant hose routing set up, and this is, I think, the big breakthrough and hopefully will solve a lot of the problems. And the only other thing I've got to do now is make a custom water neck to come down from here to connect into the radiator, but that shouldn't be too bad, and I'm actually going to get started on that right now. So when we have some more progress on that, we'll bring you back and we'll see where we're at. Alright, well, some time has passed, a little more than I was initially hoping to, but with the cold weather we were having, it just, quite frankly, wasn't that fun to be out in the garage. But yeah, this changed. I went ahead and got a factory IDI radiator taken out and got a Power Stroke radiator out of an OBS Ford like this ordered. And then I went ahead and made some mounts for it. They're still, you can see I need to tweak them a little bit more and add some bracing and whatnot, but for the test purposes, they are good to go. I've got it mounted in two places here, and then down on the bottom there, you can kind of see there's a strap that runs under to hold the bottoms, and same thing, those need braced up too. But this is going to severely, or drastically, I guess is probably a better word, improve the cooling capacity of this truck, but also it's going to make the coolant lines a lot easier to run, because you can see I actually have a lower hose on it now running up just to test fit it. I do need to notch that cross member just a little bit and double it just to give myself a little bit more room, but it's very minimal and it's only a minor trim. So the last clip I was working on, I need to make a water neck, and this is the rough idea. I was tack welding it at one point, and yeah, it kind of exploded at some point. So yeah, I gotta fix that. It's ugly, I know. Go ahead and leave your horrible welding comments below. But basically, that's going to be the lower water neck. It's going to sit basically where the factory one did. If you can kind of see down in there, this will sit down in there. This lower part here will go to the radiator, to the return line actually running into the pump, and this is the line to the pressurized tank, which I now have as well. This came out of a Freightliner, oh, I don't know, like an FL70 or something or other, I don't remember. Basically, I got just a pressurized radiator tank, and then I cut and welded a fitting on the bottom so that I have a 90 instead of straight, because otherwise it wants to just, you know, right into the fender. So the other lines here, I'll take a line. I need to get a threaded nipple for this to then just connect over to the tank here, and then this line on this side will run over to the steam line on the radiator here, or excuse me, on the radiator neck for the engine. I also got the power steering reservoir bolted, or rather welded in place. I made a bracket for it and the tank here. It's all welded up into one solid piece. It bolts using a factory bolt hole there, a bolt hole through into the air box here, and then I created a factory, I used the factory hole in the bracket to give myself a mounting point over there. So it's, you know, good and strong. It's not going anywhere. When I put the air box on it, it fits up really nice. I've got easy access to fill with coolant, power steering fluid, change my air filter, all readily accessible, and I've still got access in here to change light bulbs, because that's one thing, you can't entirely block this space because you have to be able to get to your light sockets that fit down in here. And actually, if you go too far, your light sticks out kind of like about like where my fist is on each side, and then you'll actually run into issues hitting that. So all this fits really good. I'm really happy with it. I have to just basically get lines for all of this stuff now, but I'm going to finish this water neck and do some of that stuff first, because the plumbing's the easy part. The rest of it's what takes a little bit more to figure out, but I'm going to take this to work and actually weld it better, because yeah, that's ugly as hell. But on a side note, batteries are all installed on this side. That all turned out really good. I've got just some temporary covers on it for now, but I got to get some actual covers to keep this from sparking. I am going to remake the positive cable feeding the truck. This revised setup means this cable's, well, you see, about 27 feet longer than it really needs to be. So, and I've got a little better piece of cable. Actually, that's a higher quality, and I will redo it with that. Also, in the process of moving all this around, I neglected to remember where I was going to put my washer fluid bottle. The factory IDI burp tank, or the overflow tank, would have sat kind of here, and this would have bolted to it. And the Power Stroke ones sit kind of where this air box is, and so I came up with the idea to cut a notch here in this battery tray. I still have to do this part of it. But basically, this will slip in kind of like the original brackets for the IDI would, and then this will also act as just a second battery hold down, and then I'll just extend this arm here out further and put a threaded insert into the fender liner there, and that'll hold it in place, and it'll sit kind of basically like that. And then whenever you want to take the battery out, you'll just undo the bolt in there, and then this whole thing will flip down out of the way for easy access to get the battery out, because we do want to keep in mind serviceability on this, because that's one of the key things I've been doing here, is trying to make sure that all of the modifications and different changes I make are keeping serviceability in mind, because that's honestly a really big part of this whole project and making it easy to work on, because if it's easy to work on, it makes it a whole lot easier to do a swap like this. The other thing I'm working on, and I haven't quite started yet, but it's going to go down over here, is a tack bracket. I had some questions in a previous video asking about how I was going to do the tack mounting. All right, well, now that I found the tack bracket, the plan is basically, this is just a magnetic pickup. I don't know if you can see that, if the camera will focus on it, but that's just a little magnetic pickup that then has a 2-wire sensor that goes into the dash. And on the factory IDIs, they went off of the injection pump timing gear, and then this kind of just went into the side, and it counted the number of teeth on the injection pump timing gear, which I believe was 53 teeth. And it would count basically every time this saw 53 little waves or whatever, with basically this makes a sine wave, so every time it saw 53 little bumps, it knew that was 1 revolution. And what I'm just going to do, unfortunately that's just a super fun number to have to create, and I've got to double check that to actually make sure that is the correct number that this needs. But as of now, the plan is to take this and basically set it way down in here, basically on the damper, kind of roughly off of where that pointer is, basically sitting on this outer rib here, because this outer rib actually has a location where a couple of timing notches were already made. And basically I'm going to use that outer rib to essentially give me the signal for this that'll then feed through the factory harness to make the dash work. And so I've just got some plate steel here, some flat stock. I'm going to make up a little adapter to thread this into and then have it adjust to get it to the right distance, because this has to be a certain distance off of the material. It has to be, you know, basically like that off of the material, no, without it touching, obviously. You know, so it has to be held, you know, about that close to it. You know, like 1/8 of an inch or so. Actually, I think it's even less than that. I've got to read up on the spec, but yeah, that's basically the next to get this working. Because I would like to get the tack working. I think they're really cool when they work in these swaps. So next thing I got to do is we're going to get that tack bracket figured out. We're going to get the lower radiator pipe hose fitting thing. Don't really know what to call this, but get this piece done, whacked in there, and then hopefully I can get once I get that done, get the tack sensor done. I'll also be getting hoses figured out, because I've got to come up with the hose to go from this, which is 2 1/4, down to 1 3/4. I've got to probably run some kind of reducing elbows and something to get it kind of like this, or I'm going to run like this. I don't know. We'll see. I'll figure out something, but basically getting this to connect to that, and, you know, making all the things connect to the other things with some stuff in the middle. Basically with the end goal to get some coolant in this thing, get the power steering pump full of fluid as well, and I'll just, for the moment, probably just run the line up and into the brake booster and start plumbing that. I don't know if I'm going to actually do all the plumbing for that right now, but we'll see. It kind of depends on how things are going. But in addition to this, I have also started, with the help of some buddies, making the transmission brackets. At the moment, this is about all far as I've got. We just got the little triangle pieces that are going to form the mounts cut out. And actually, I have another idea that I think I might save some of these and actually use some factory cab mounts for the transmission mounts, because they're very similar to what I'm trying to create. So I'm going to see if that's going to work or not. But the goal of this is we're going to get the transmission mounted as well. So we're slowly kind of picking at different things and trying to keep myself moving from one task to the other, and help from getting bogged down in one task. But the other big thing that I haven't really started yet, that I'm working on, and you saw from the last video, is we're still running out of a jerry can. So I got to figure out getting my tank lines run and all that. But yeah, the old IDI radiator sitting over there, it's going to be for sale. If anybody wants it, she's going to be for sale, along with some other IDI parts that I don't need. So yeah, we're moving right along, and I'll bring y'all back when I get some more progress made.